model car fans, welcome to the Muscle Car Modeler. My name is Revell. This week I'm going to feature a build here of a 64 Ford Thunderbolt. This is the Tasca Ford Thunderbolt, driven by Bill Lawton. When it comes to the Thunderbolt, Tasca Ford can be considered as the father of the Thunderbolt, even though they really didn't call it the Thunderbolt. That name came later. When it came to the cars, Ford was drag racing and they were racing 427 powered Galaxies. And they had some lightweight ones of those, but they were still getting creamed, and they were looking for options and ideas and what they can do to make it more competitive. And of course, making it lighter was the next step, but they'd already lightened it as much as they could, and they were looking to either make more power or make it even lighter. But they had just come out with the 427 to 425 horse motor, and the motor was being pretty competitive, but the cars were not. And the biggest issue was the cars were getting smaller from the competitors. Mopar had switched to the smaller cars, and Chevy was kind of doing the same thing, even though Chevrolet really got out of racing due to the racing ban that was going on. The manufacturers were kind of stepping out, but Ford didn't quite do that just yet. So Tasca, they had built a Ford Fairlane, a 63 Fairlane, and it was running a big block in it, and they wedged a 406 in it, not a 427. And Ford had heard about it, so they had come check it out, and they were looking it over and decided, that's not a bad idea. Let's see if we can put one of these motors in a Fairlane 500 and see what we can do with it. So they took 11 of them. Well, initially it was 10, but they took 10 of them, all painted burgundy, over to Dearborn Steel and Tubing, and had them do the conversions of wedging their biggest 427 motor into it, which was a high riser and everything. So they went ahead and built one initially, and they were testing it. They liked what they did. Then they built the other 10 to make the first batch of 11, which some say 10, some say 11. It's kind of, the numbers are kind of goofy there. It was very competitive and it was really taking off, and they had a 3,200 pound weight limit, but the Fairlane weighed 2,900 and something pounds. So they're like, all right, we're definitely underweight as far as the NHRA rules were. So like, all right, we're definitely underweight, so we don't have to worry about that too much. But once they shoehorned the big 427 motor in it, and then they reinforced the suspension and did some things to it, and then they were testing, so like, all right, this is working out pretty good. So they came out with a few things. They did fiberglass doors, fiberglass fenders, fiberglass hood, and initially they did a fiberglass front bumper as well. And NHRA said, no, that's not legal. You have to have a metal front bumper. So then they switched them out to aluminum. So the first 10 had gotten fiberglass front bumpers, but they were all switched out to aluminum bumpers. But they did all this to actually shift the weight. They weren't too concerned about saving the weight. They took the bucket seats out and they put the lightweight bucket seats in there, but they left the back seat in. It still, needed to be stock somewhat. But yeah, so they left the back seat in there, and the rear trunk stayed metal, and they moved the battery to the back, but most of that was actually to shift weight. So they had a 3,200 pound weight limit, and they were trying to make it as light as possible, but they still had to be in the right weight. It was working out pretty good for them, and the car was taking off and showed in testing that it was going to be very competitive. So they were really excited about that. So then they went back to NHRA and they showed them the car and everything, and they were told that they needed to make 100 of them. Like, 100? It's 50. Well, you need 50 automatics and 50 manuals, so you need to make 100 of them. That's the generally accepted number. I see that posted all the time, that 100 of these were made. And the first numbers I'd seen was there was 51 manual trannies and 49 automatics, and they had used a Lincoln automatic, which wasn't very competitive, but they made them. Some raced with the automatic, but many of them were converted over to the 4-speed. Even if they had the automatic, they were converted over to the 4-speeds. But very competitive car, legendary car, and they just took off like crazy. So Tasca Ford had a lot to do with the initial thing, and then they had sold a few of them there. You could actually go to your Ford dealer if you knew what you were doing and order and buy this car for a limited time, because they only did a small batch of them. Now, some actually say that it's accepted that 125 were actually built, and if you count the 265s that were made, 127. But it was a 1 year only car, and that's because of a lot of the classes and rule changes and where the manufacturers racing were going. See, in '65 they started to really get into the altered wheelbase funny cars, and Mopar had shifted towards that for '65. Ford's kind of same thing. It's like, all right, well, these cars are very competitive, and they were just, beating the crap out of everybody, and have reached legendary status. I mean, awesome car as far as performance and how they were doing. But the cars themselves, after the '64 season, some of them that were given to the racers were sold to them for $1. Many other privateers had bought their own, and dealerships had bought their own and raced them for advertising, which the Tasca Ford was one of those. And researching the car, it's kind of hard to find out whatever happened to the car. It's, when you Google it and everything, you can find pictures of the car, but I couldn't really find out what happened to the car, if the car still exists. When you're Googling it, it pulls up these model kits, of course, and all the die-cast cars that were released. So when I try and Google the actual car, it's kind of lost to time, it seems like. But the story of the Thunderbolt is all over the internet, so that part is pretty cool. But some of the other cars, you can find the actual cars, find the history of what happened to them or where they went. But this particular one, I could not figure out where it went or what had happened to it. But for me, when Revell issued this kit in 1990, I was still in high school, but I was building models, and I was kind of, starting to get out of it. But I had seen it, and I wanted this one because I'm like, this color combo just looks awesome. Just really loved it. I'm like, I got to build that one. And when I went back to the hobby store, it was gone, and it was a fairly new release, and I think it just sold really well because I couldn't find it in the stores anywhere. And shortly after they had released the second car, that's the Russ Davis Ford, the Thunderbolt, that's poppy red. I had shown you that one, but this particular one escaped me. And they only issued this kit once in 1990, and then same thing with the orange one was also issued in 1990, and these were molded in color. I really enjoyed building them, and I really liked building the Revell monogram kits at the time, and they were just a pleasure to build, and this kit is no exception right there. Built this, I've actually got 4 of these built, and I've got 3 or 4 more in my stash, and there are many decals available for many different versions. And I even seen decals to make the white version of this, the Tasca Ford, and everybody shows it with the '64 car like this with the white decals, also driven by Bill Lawton, but that car was actually the '63 car. So it'd be interesting to kind of build the '63, and only that one car was built. Ford built all the '64s, and Ford built 2 '65s, but they didn't make any to actually race in '65, or any more to be available to builders. But this kit, due to the way the economy is now and eBay and everything, finding this kit is much easier now with online and everything. And then that's how I had gotten this one. I eventually just started searching for it and keeping my eyes on it and trying not to spend too much money, and find one that wasn't opened or decals missing, because for some reason I had found a bunch of these where the decals were actually missing. And that was the biggest issue, because this kit, even though this box art and this decal package was only issued once, for the longest time they were not reissued. It wasn't until like 2000, 1999 or 2000, they'd finally reissued the Thunderbolt kit, but with generic decals. I believe it was Flames. I'd bought a couple of those, and that's what I got now, is most of the reissues where they have more generic decals. But it's a great kit to build. I mean, I love them. And they got many options. Like this one, I put the radar wheels on it. The other one, I put the other wheels on it. It comes with 2 sets of chrome wheels and a plain set of steel wheels. So if you've seen this kit, it comes with all that. And then also 2 transmissions, although both of these are manual trannies. Most of them are raced with manual trannies. So I built them with manual trannies. I want to build an automatic one, but finding an actual car raced as an automatic seems to be kind of strange, because all the ones I'd find with history, looking into them, they were all manual tranny cars. And then the first ones actually didn't have the teardrop hood. The prototypes, they had a different hood, but by the time they went to racing, they had put this hood on it. And I did a few things to this kit when it comes to building it. I really didn't do much modifications wise. Now the paint, This is vintage burgundy from Scale Finishes, and I sprayed the whole thing. The top color is gold. It's just Tamiya spray paint gold, and then the interior, which I love it how it came out on this one, because they were kind of a gold color interior on these. I used Tamiya's spray champagne silver, champagne gold, and it's just to me a perfect match. So I did a bunch of them with that interior color. So, and it came out really nice. And these are just the kit issue decals all over this body, and it's clear coated. I think I built this one about 8 to 10 years ago, maybe less. But if you saw my other Thunderbolt, I did the same thing with this one, although I did a much better job on this one, putting the screen mesh in there so you can see through it. But and thinned out the back of the hood to get it to sit fairly flush. So I opened up the back of the hood and put the screen mesh in there. And I did the same thing to the headlights. They have the screen mesh in there also. I just used a hole punch and punched it, which is kind of hard to cut the screen, and then dropped them in there instead of the clear lights. Painted the front bumper aluminum, and just orange the turn signal amber on the turn signal lenses. Oh, that wheel just came off. No biggie. Just snaps right on. The underside I did, all of the just painting in detail, which the cars that I'd seen, and from what I understood, after they were done doing them, they just painted all the underside black, so it made it really hard to see the modifications they did compared to the stock one. But Revell copied a lot of the stuff from original cars, where they braced up the rear axle so it would hook up and squat better, and I painted the leaf spring steel. And then there's the factory exhaust system, because they had to run a full exhaust as far as the rules went, but they didn't have to actually be functional. Like this one is kind of functional. It's actually hooked up. And they ran the headers, which the headers I understand were a real chore to actually make on the real cars. So Revell copied those pretty faithfully. And then I painted the motor black. A lot of them, I think even the directions would tell you to paint the motor blue. But Ford didn't start painting their motors blue until 66. So 64 and 65 should be black. But it's a very nice motor. And it's the 427 high-rise side oiler that's in these. And then of course the air cleaner package with the snorkels and everything. And it's just a wonderful car. I'll put the wheel back on here since it popped right off, but it's just on its peg, so it'll go right back on. But these are just a great kit, and a pretty easy kit to build, other than getting the front suspension, the engine, and the headers in there. It's a little bit tight, but it can be done. And I love these. I mean, when it comes to these Thunderbolts, like I said, this is the second one I've shown you of the two original kits, and it was my personal favorite for the longest time. But I did buy a bunch of them, and 4 of them are built, and I'll show you the rest eventually, and then get to building another one. But highly recommend this kit, and I know it's been released a few times now. They're not really hard to find anymore. So, and just wonderful kits, and enjoy them. So thank you for tuning in, subscribing, and all your comments. I really appreciate it. And you guys, you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next Saturday.